For a closer look at the COP28 deal, Harjeet Singh, head of global political strategy at Climate Action Network International, joins us live from Dubai. Now, Harjeet, the issue of fossil fuels was contentious throughout the COP28 summit. How significant is this final deal?
Thank you, Paul, for having me. This is absolutely historic because after more than 30 years, there's a glaring spotlight on fossil fuels, the primary driver of climate change. And having a decision to transition away from fossil fuels in line with science is big. Yes, there are a few loopholes that we need to really plug. And there's also a big challenge in terms of no finance being made available at a scale at which it is needed by developing countries. But overall decision on the issue of fossil fuel is absolutely unprecedented, especially when the last two big agreements, the Convention in 1992 and Paris Agreement in 2015, did not even mention fossil fuels or coal, oil, or gas.
Now, you mentioned some loopholes in that process. What might be some of them?
So the language is about unabated fossil fuels. It talks about nuclear. It also refers to removal technologies. And we know that these are unproven technologies. And if we continue to bank on these, then we are actually providing a free pass to the fossil fuel industry, that wants to portray as if carbon capture and utilization and storage technologies are going to solve the problem. The fact is we need a real reduction in the use of fossil fuels, and we should stop exploring an expansion now. But these technologies may allow fossil fuel industry to prolong the use of fossil fuels and continue with business as usual.
Now, many countries still disappointed with the wording phasing out was notably missing. What does transition away mean, and why was that a compromise?
So phasing out is absolutely far more stronger and robust. And we did not get it because developing countries in particular felt that by saying fossil fuel phase out without backing it with enough technology and resource that has been lacking for years and decades, they will be put under pressure to do more than developed countries who have all the resources, yet they have not been able to phase out. Rather, they continue to expand fossil fuels back home. And particularly countries like Australia, Canada, US, UK, and Norway, they preach and put pressure on developing countries to do more, but have not been doing enough and rather going backwards on their commitments.
So what does this deal mean for countries that were pushing back against even the mention of fossil fuels?
So there are various reasons for different countries to push back. When Saudi Arabia does that, it's basically siding with the industry and to make much more money and prolong the use of fossil fuels. But when you hear from Indonesia and Pakistan, India and South Africa of the world, for them, they are relying on fossil fuels for their basic consumption and for industry. And they have not been getting any finance to transition away from fossil fuels. I come from India, and the situation is that more than 80% of green finance in India is domestic. So despite showing the political will, there is not enough support coming in. So for them to agree to fossil fuel phase out without any support on technology and finance was extremely difficult. That's why they pushed back, and the language that was agreed eventually was transitioning away.
Now, along with the issue of fossil fuels, which has suddenly taken the headlines, COP28 had to address climate financing and mitigation. What progress was made on those fronts, you think?
Well, this is an area which has seen very little progress. In fact, developed countries try to weaken that language. So at various places in the text, it says and recognizes that the support is needed by developing countries, but really doesn't point out the responsibility of rich countries to provide hundreds of billions of dollars. The fact is that the needs are now running into trillions if we really want the transition to happen. And also supporting countries in the global south who are facing climate emergencies. So we need finance for action across the board, for mitigation, for moving away from fossil fuels in a just and equitable manner, but also to deal with climate impacts, such as preparing for these disasters, what we call adaptation, and also addressing these impacts. The whole loss and damage fund, which got quite a bit of attention, but the amount of money that is needed is nowhere near the scale.
Now that the 200 countries have agreed on the final draft, but going forward, what more do you think needs to be done to avert the worst of climate change?
Well, the other challenge that we feel this particular process does is it has been so complex and it only talked about what needs to be done. I think we also need to look at the how part of it and who needs to do how much and by when. And those details are missing. And that's why we have been calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which should be complementary to Paris Agreement to really work on those details on who should stop exploration and expansion, how we are going to phase out of fossil fuels in a just and equitable manner. And at the heart of it is going to be international cooperation, which means finance and technology. Those timelines, those details, that how part, is missing. And that's why many countries have come forward. Colombia, which is dependent on fossil fuel for its revenues and even exports, has come out for a call for this treaty, and countries like Timor-Leste and many more countries have really pushed for this agenda at this COP, and which is supported by thousands of scientists and civil society organizations, even 101 Nobel laureates, faith communities. So we really need something which is complementary to Paris Agreement, so that the direction that we have got at this COP can now be secured in a manner where we start working on the details and implement that decision by having a new global framework that actually, completes the work in terms of implementation and fills the void that exists currently.
Well, Harjeet, thank you very much for your insights. And we were speaking to Harjeet Singh, Head of Global Political Strategy by Climate Action Network International. Thank you.